Some wolves are born to conquer kingdoms. Others are born to bring those wolves to their knees. And every now and then, the moon goddess has a sense of humor about it. Lark smoothed the front of her simple healer's tunic for the 10th time. A nervous habit she thought she'd kicked years ago. It did nothing. The tunic remained stubbornly simple. She remained stubbornly nervous. Before her stood the grand carved oak doors of the Alpha King's personal chambers, each swirl of wood looking more expensive than her entire life's earnings. Behind her, head healer Alara was vibrating with an emotion that looked suspiciously like glee. "Are you certain I'm the right person for this, Alara?" Lark asked, her voice a low murmur. "I specialize in herbal remedies, not wrestling with royalty." Alara patted her shoulder with a hand that was far too firm to be comforting. "Nonsense, dear. You have the firmest hand and the least patience for melodrama in this entire infirmary. The king requires a steady presence." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He tried to command the stitches to heal themselves, with his voice. It didn't work." Lark's heart sank into her stomach. Oh, wonderful. He was one of those patients, the kind who thought their own sheer force of will could knit flesh back together. She'd dealt with proud warriors before, men who'd try to walk off a severed limb, but an Alpha King was an entirely different level of stubborn. This was a man whose daily routine probably involved glaring at mountains until they moved out of his way. Her wolf, a calm and disciplined presence at the back of her mind, assessed the situation with characteristic precision. An alpha who commands his own stitches is an alpha who has lost perspective. We will restore it. Lark mentally sighed. You make it sound like a military operation. Healing is a military operation, her wolf replied, without a trace of irony. The reports said it was a rogue attack, Lark prodded, hoping for more information. Information was armor. It was, Ilara confirmed, her eyes twinkling. A very large, very angry grizzly bear. Apparently, His Majesty felt the royal beehives were not producing honey of a high enough quality for the upcoming summer festival, so he went to procure a sample from a more exclusive source. Lark blinked. He fought a bear. For honey. For the principle of good honey, Ilara corrected primly. He won, of course, but the bear got in a few lucky shots. Deep claw marks across his ribs and back. Nothing life-threatening, but it requires diligent care to prevent infection. Ilara paused, her expression growing serious. He's refused 3 other healers, Lark. The first was young Marin, barely 6 months into her training. His growl triggered a genuine dominance response in her wolf. The poor girl couldn't stop her knees from buckling. The second was old Bartholomew, who made the mistake of calling him dear boy and trying to fluff his pillows. His Majesty nearly bit his hand. And the third, healer Corwin, actually got as far as touching the bandage. The king's pain reflex seized Corwin's wrist hard enough to bruise, not out of cruelty, mind you, just raw, uncontrolled agony meeting a warrior's instincts. Lark understood. You need someone whose wolf won't buckle under his dominance. Precisely, Ilara said, a knowing smile on her lips. And your wolf, my dear, has the most ironclad self-control I have ever witnessed in 30 years of healing. Your wolf doesn't submit. It simply refuses to engage with the theatrics. That was, Lark had to admit, an accurate description. Her wolf treated alpha posturing the way a seasoned schoolteacher treated a child's tantrum, with patient, unmovable indifference. We do not submit to noise, her wolf confirmed. We submit to reason. Won't run away crying when he growls at you. Now in you go. Don't let him intimidate you. His bark is currently much worse than his bite. Mostly because biting would pull his stitches. With a final, not at all reassuring shove, Ilara bustled away down the corridor. Lark took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked. A deep, rumbling voice from within snapped, "Enter." It sounded like gravel being dragged over stone. Pushing the heavy door open, Lark stepped inside and felt her jaw tighten. The room was obscene. A fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox roared merrily on one wall. A tapestry depicting some bloody, heroic battle covered another. The bed was a 4-poster monstrosity of dark wood draped in furs. And in the middle of it all, sitting on the edge of the bed, was him. Alpha King Ragnar, a startling shade of stormy gray, were narrowed on her. His torso was bare, save for the pristine white bandages wrapped tightly around his ribs. Even sitting, he radiated an aura of power that seemed to press down on the very air in the room. Lark's wolf stirred, assessing the alpha's power with clinical detachment. Strong, very strong. Also very injured and pretending not to be. Typical. "You're the new one?" he grunted, his voice laced with disdain. He looked her up and down. "They're getting smaller. Did they run out of actual healers and start sending the kitchen staff?" Lark's spine stiffened. Staff are far too sensible to volunteer for this duty. "I'm Lark. Head healer Alara sent me to change your bandages and administer your medicine." "I don't need medicine," he bit out. "And I don't need a babysitter. My healing is advanced. The wounds will be closed by morning." His wolf disagreed. The small female smells of chamomile and poultices. Her wolf is steady, like a stone in a river. Let her help. Ragnar mentally snarled at the voice in his head. "I am the Alpha King. I do not need help." "Her wolf smells like discipline," his wolf added dreamily. "I like discipline." Ragnar told his wolf to be quiet. Lark merely raised a single, unimpressed eyebrow. "Is that so? And will your royal decree also prevent the very real, very mundane threat of infection? Because I assure you, Gangrene is remarkably unimpressed by crowns." A low growl started in his chest. It was a sound that had sent hardened generals scrambling for cover. Lark's wolf didn't even flick an ear. Is he growling at us? How quaint. Lark just stared at him, her expression unchanging. She waited until the sound died in his throat before speaking again, her tone dry as dust. "Are you finished? I'd like to get this over with so I can go back to treating patients who actually want to live. Now, if you would be so kind as to lie down, Your Majesty." Ragnar stared at her, genuinely taken aback. No one spoke to him that way. No one. This woman was looking at him as if he were a toddler throwing a tantrum. It was infuriating. It was also, his wolf whispered with a flicker of interest, strangely compelling. She is not afraid. Her wolf is not afraid. They stand like oaks. "I will not," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. He stood, intending to loom over her. It was a good plan, in theory. In practice, the sudden movement sent a searing bolt of fire through his side. He choked back a gasp, his jaw clenching so hard a muscle jumped. He managed to stay upright, but the brief flash of agony in his eyes was unmistakable. Lark didn't mock him. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just sighed, a soft, weary sound, and gestured to the bed with her chin. "The throne isn't going anywhere, Your Majesty. But you will be, straight to the ancestral crypt, if you tear those stitches. Lie down." Defeated by his own body, Ragnar slowly lowered himself back onto the bed, a thunderous scowl etched on his face. He was the Alpha King. And he was being treated like a misbehaving child. His day, he decided, could not possibly get any worse. He was wrong. It was about to get so much worse. The next morning, Lark returned to find Ragnar pacing his chambers like a caged lion. He was still shirtless, the previous day's bandages looking slightly frayed around the edges. "Good morning, Your Majesty," Lark said, her voice deliberately cheerful. "I trust you had a restful night of not moving and allowing your body to heal?" He shot her a glare that could have curdled milk. "I do not rest. I recuperate." "Of course," Lark said, placing her satchel on the table. She pulled out a small stone bowl containing a thick, dark green paste. The smell that wafted from it was potent. "Time for your poultice." Ragnar's nose wrinkled in disgust. "What is that foul sludge?" "This foul sludge is what's going to keep your very important internal organs from becoming very infected external organs," she replied. "It's a powerful antiseptic, and it promotes tissue regeneration." "It smells like swamp mud and despair," he grumbled, taking a step back as she approached. "A fitting scent for your current mood, then," she retorted without missing a beat. "Now, on the bed, I need to remove the old bandages." He crossed his arms over his chest. "No." Lark paused, spatula in hand. "No?" "I heal naturally," he repeated. "My wolf is strong. I do not require peasant mud smeared on my body." His wolf, however, was having very different thoughts. "The mud scent is strong. It will make us well. The little healer is wise. We should listen to her. Perhaps she will let us lie near her by the fire." "She is a commoner giving me orders," Ragnar shot back internally. His wolf considered this. "What if we showed her our strength by lying very still and being brave about the mud?" She would be impressed. Ragnar had never wanted to strangle his own wolf more. Lark's wolf, meanwhile, was observing his behavior with the detached disapproval of a general watching raw recruits. His wolf has no control over him. This is a leadership failure. Lark set the bowl down with a soft clink. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, your wolf is currently housed in a body that was used as a scratching post by a half-ton beast of the forest. This isn't a request." She picked up the bowl again. He took another step back. She took a step forward. It was a bizarre, slow-motion standoff. The most powerful shifter on the continent versus a 5'4" healer with a bowl of smelly paste. Just then, the door opened, and Hudson, the king's beta and long-suffering best friend, stepped inside. He took in the scene. "Ragnar, what in the name of the moon goddess are you doing? Are you playing some sort of bizarre game of tag?" "She is trying to poison me with swamp weeds," Ragnar declared. Lark gave Hudson a look that said, "You deal with this." Hudson sighed. "Ragnar, it's comfrey root. You used it yourself after the Battle of Blackwood Ridge. You said it was a miracle paste." "That was different," Ragnar insisted. "My honor was at stake." "And now your skin is at stake," Hudson said. Then his expression hardened slightly. "You know what else is at stake? My patience. You sent me to inspect grain stores, Ragnar. Grain stores. While you went bear hunting alone in the Blackwood. I'm still angry about that. So forgive me if I'm not feeling particularly sympathetic to your hatred of herbal paste." Ragnar's jaw tightened. The fact that he deliberately sent Hudson on a decoy mission to keep him safe was a truth that sat uneasily between them. "Just let her apply the poultice," Hudson said, his voice gentler now. "Think of it as strategic battle paint." But the humiliation of being cornered was too much. His eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "I am fine," he announced, and the Alpha command ripped out of him before he could stop it. It surged through the room like a wall of force, fueled not by intent, but by frustration and pain. "Leave me." Hudson fought the pull with practiced ease. Lark felt it too, the wave of compulsion crashing against her wolf like surf against a seawall. Her wolf absorbed the impact, categorized it, and filed it under unnecessary. Her wolf's response was the psychic equivalent of a librarian adjusting her spectacles. That was very loud. Was there a point? Lark blinked. "Did you just try to use your alpha voice on me? To avoid a poultice?" Something cold moved through Ragnar's chest. Not anger. Shame. He hadn't used the command involuntarily since he was 16, raging at his father's funeral. This woman was unraveling him, pulling loose threads he hadn't known existed. He forced the feeling down, burying it under a snarl. The growl that ripped from his chest was furious, embarrassed, and primal. He glared at the bowl in her hands as if it were his mortal enemy. He actually growled at the medicine bowl. His wolf, rather than supporting this display, was mortified. We used the command. We lost control. In front of her. His wolf buried its metaphorical nose under its paws. She will think we are unhinged. Lark's wolf agreed. He is unhinged. Hudson pinched the bridge of his nose. All right, that's it. Good luck, Lark. Try not to let him bleed on the Aubusson carpet. He gave her an apologetic smile and beat a hasty retreat. Lark was alone with the king again. The bowl doesn't seem intimidated, Your Majesty, she said, her voice flat. It's an inanimate object. Before she could finish, he moved. He snatched a thick fur pelt, wrapped it around his waist, and strode towards the balcony doors. I'm going for a run, he declared. You most certainly are not, she said, moving to block his path. It will tear every single stitch and you'll bleed out in the royal gardens, she countered. Which, I suppose, would solve my problem of having to treat you, but Alara would be very cross with me. His wolf was going insane. Strength. She challenges the alpha. Her wolf stands firm against ours. She is worthy. Claim her immediately. We must bring her gifts. What do healers like? Herbs? We will bring her the finest herbs in the land. We will roll in them first so they smell like us. You will do no such thing, Ragnar hissed internally. Lark's wolf was having a very different experience. If he takes one more step towards that door, I am going to personally take control of our body and sit on him. You will not, Lark told her wolf firmly. Watch me. Lark knew the moment she turned her back, he would do something monumentally stupid. So when she left the king's chambers to fetch a fresh supply of linen bandages, she issued a final, stern warning. Do not move from that bed. Do not stand. Do not pace. And if you even think about shifting, I will personally grind up itching powder and mix it into your next poultice. Understood? He had given her a sullen nod. It was the most compliance she'd gotten out of him yet, which should have been her first clue. The moment the door clicked shut, Ragnar was off the bed. His wolf was a storm under his skin, not with aggression, but with frantic, restless energy. The injury was an insult, the confinement was a cage, and the little healer was a complication. He had to prove her wrong. The most fundamental expression of a shifter's power was the shift itself. He moved to the center of the vast room, giving himself space. He closed his eyes, drawing on the deep well of power within him. He called to his wolf, urging it to the surface. The change began with a familiar, searing heat, a fire in his bones. He welcomed it. The pain of the transformation would be a cleansing fire, burning away the weakness of the injury. The fire met the agony in his side and exploded. A raw cry was torn from his throat. The shift stalled, caught halfway between man and beast. One of his ears elongated, fur sprouting along the edge, while the other remained stubbornly human. His spine arched, muscles spasming violently. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, the partial shift receding, leaving him trembling with the added indignity of one slightly pointed, fuzzy ear. His wolf whimpered. That was a bad idea. We should have listened to the healer. His gaze fell upon the large secondary window overlooking the royal gardens. It was only a 2-story drop. For a shifter in his prime, it was nothing. For him right now, it was a risk. But it was better than staying here, waiting for her to return and see his failure. He swung himself over the sill and launched himself into the air. He was aiming for the grass. He landed squarely in the middle of the prize-winning Celestial Queen rosebush. Thorns snagged his fur wrap and pricked his skin. He let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. He tried to stand. His legs buckled. He went down into the thorns again and had to drag himself out on his elbows, thorns raking across his forearms. He crawled onto the grass, breathing ragged, vision swimming. His wolf offered a single, devastating observation. The healer is going to kill us. The royal gardener, old Merrick, appeared from behind a hedgerow, pruning shears frozen mid-clip. Without a word, he extended a weathered hand. Ragnar refused it. The realization, when it came later, would gut him, that this reflexive rejection of every offered hand, this compulsive need to suffer alone, was not strength. It was something broken in him, something that had been broken for a very long time. But that realization was for later. Right now, he just pushed himself to his feet through sheer willpower and limped away with what remained of his dignity. He needed to fix this himself. He remembered the herbs in her poultice, comfrey root, yarrow. If he could just get the raw ingredients, he could chew them himself. It was the wolf's way. His wolf perked up. Yes, the wolf's way. The healer will see that we are resourceful. She will be so attracted. He found the healer's garden easily. He scanned the plants, looking for comfrey. Then, behind a small iron gate with a brass latch, the restricted section, he saw a patch of delicate, star-shaped flowers with silvery leaves. The slate marker read, "Moon petal, external use only. Causes deep tissue staining if ingested." Ragnar did not read the sign. He was a king, not a student of botany. He snapped the flimsy latch with one hand. He ripped a handful of comfrey leaves, another of yarrow, and a generous bunch of the moon petal. He shoved the entire concoction into his mouth and began to chew. The taste was vile. But he was an alpha king. He could endure. A strange, tingling numbness began to spread across his tongue. He swallowed the gritty paste, feeling a surge of triumphant pride. His wolf was very proud. See, we are powerful. We have consumed the healing plants and, why does our mouth feel strange? Is it supposed to tingle? It was then that Lark found him. She had returned to find the chambers empty and wasn't even surprised. She rounded the corner of the hedgerow, her face set in a thunderous expression, and stopped dead. He stood there, chest puffed out, looking defiant and proud, and his entire mouth, his lips, his teeth, and his entire tongue was stained a deep, vibrant, electric blue. He looked like a child who had just murdered and devoured a blue frosted cupcake. Lark stared. He stared back, the blue of his mouth a stark, ridiculous contrast to the stormy gray of his eyes. The triumphant words he'd been about to utter died in his throat. Lark's wolf issued its verdict with surgical precision. He ate the moon petal. He ate the restricted, clearly labeled, iron-gated moon petal. I have no words. I have run out of words. Lark's expression slowly shifted from anger to a calm, quiet fury that was infinitely more terrifying than any shouting match. She didn't say a word. She just turned on her heel and began marching back towards the castle. Ragnar, for the first time since the bear, felt a genuine flicker of fear. He scrambled to follow her. "Healer, wait!" His wolf trailed after her wolf's presence like a lovesick disaster. "Wait! Come back!" Stormed through the servants' entrance, scanned the room, her eyes landing on a rack of wooden utensils. She selected the largest one, a thick, sturdy stirring spoon nearly 2 feet long. She spun around to face him. He had followed her in, looking confused and, if she was honest with herself, a little pathetic, with his blue-stained lips and bleeding arms. She brandished the spoon, pointing it directly at his sternum. The kitchen fell silent. "You," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You are going back to your room. Now." Ragnar's alpha instincts roared to life. He drew himself up to his full height. "You will not speak to me in that tone." "Oh, I am just getting started," she shot back, poking him in the chest with the end of the spoon. You reopened your wounds jumping out of a window." "A window, Your Majesty. And then you broke into the restricted section of my herb garden and poisoned yourself with raw moon petal. Because you have the impulse control of a teething infant. Your tongue is blue. Blue!" Another poke with the spoon, harder this time. "You will go upstairs. You will get in that bed. You will let me clean the rose thorns and garden dirt out of your very important, very royal claw marks, and you will drink every last drop of the foul-smelling broth I prepare for you. If you argue, if you complain, or if you so much as twitch in a way I don't like, I will take this spoon," she shook it menacingly, "and I will use it to personally paddle your royal backside until it matches your tongue. Are we clear?" Ragnar was speechless. His human mind was reeling, a maelstrom of outrage and indignation. How dare she? In front of his staff. He should have her thrown in the dungeons. He should roar and put her in her place. But his wolf was in heaven. "Our mate," it howled with pure, unadulterated joy. "She is magnificent, fierce, a true Luna. She wields the spoon of authority. We must claim her immediately. What do healers like? Herbs? We will roll in them first so they smell like us." "You will do no such thing," Ragnar hissed internally. Lark's wolf was watching with professional appreciation. Her form is excellent, direct, commanding, no wasted words. "I approve of the spoon." "I don't need your approval to use a spoon," Lark thought. "You have it anyway." The force of his wolf's approval completely short-circuited his anger, replacing it with a bewildering surge of protective, possessive attraction. He looked at the furious woman threatening him with a ladle, and all he could think was, "Mine." From the doorway, Hudson appeared, drawn by the unnatural silence. He took in the scene. His alpha king, blue-mouthed and stunned, being held at bay by a small healer with a very large spoon. A slow grin spread across his face. He didn't say a word. He just slowly backed out of the doorway, his shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Ragnar, defeated by the mutiny in his own soul, finally dropped his gaze and gave a short, jerky nod. "Good," Lark said, her voice crisp. "Now march." And the Alpha King, his dignity in tatters and his wolf singing songs of praise, turned and marched out of the kitchen, dutifully followed by his spoon-wielding captor. The legend of Lark and the royal spoon had just begun. The walk back to the royal chambers was the longest, most humiliating journey of Ragnar's life. Every guard they passed snapped to attention, but he could see the twitching at the corners of their mouths. News traveled fast. He, the Alpha King, had been publicly subdued by a wooden spoon. Lark marched him into his room and pointed at the bed. "Sit." He sat. Lark's fury had cooled, leaving behind the familiar, brisk efficiency of a healer. She worked in silence. She cleaned his reopened wounds with an alcohol-based tincture that stung like fire, and he bore it without a sound. She tweezed out thorns from his shoulder and forearm, her touch surprisingly gentle despite the hardness in her jaw. As she worked, the forced proximity became a palpable thing. A loose strand of her brown hair brushed against his arm. He could smell the clean, herbal scent of her skin. It was calming, grounding. His wolf simply hummed with a low, possessive purr that he desperately tried to suppress. Lark's wolf, despite its ironclad discipline, was experiencing something it had not anticipated. The proximity to his wolf, injured, humbled, finally still, stirred something warm in her chest. Not attraction. She refused to call it attraction. Professional acknowledgement of a pleasing scent. That was all. "It is definitely attraction," her wolf corrected. "It is not. His wolf smells like pine and thunderstorms, and we want to press our nose against his neck. That is attraction." Lark told her wolf to focus on the task at hand and stop being ridiculous. Her wolf complied, but with an air of smug patience that suggested it was simply waiting to be proven right. Over the next few hours, a steady stream of people found excuses to be in the royal corridor. Lord Valerius, the ancient head of his council, suddenly needed to inspect the tapestry directly opposite Ragnar's door, muttering about thread counts. A junior guard captain conducted a painfully slow inspection of the wall sconces, polishing each one with meticulous care. Even the castle's chief architect appeared with a measuring tape, claiming to be checking the corridor's structural integrity. Each of them would cast a quick, curious glance through the slightly ajar door, where they would see their formidable king sitting meekly in bed while a small healer tidied up around him. Ragnar saw them all. He pretended he didn't, but the heat of his embarrassment could have forged steel. "Why did you become a healer?" he asked, the words rough. He needed to break the silence. Lark's hands paused for a fraction of a second before resuming their work. "My younger brother was sickly as a child. The village healer was old and forgetful. I started learning about herbs so I could help him. I discovered I was good at it, and that I preferred the company of plants to most people. They're less likely to jump out of windows." A faint flush crept up his neck. It was a strategic retreat. "From a bowl of medicine?" she asked. She finally met his eyes, and there was a flicker of something other than annoyance in them. "What are you so afraid of, Your Majesty?" "I am afraid of nothing," he snapped. His wolf disagreed. "We are afraid of many things. We are afraid of failing our people. We are afraid of being weak. We are afraid of the way the healer makes us feel, which is—" "Quiet!" Ragnar thundered internally. "Of course not," she said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe him. "You just fight bears for honey and leap into rose bushes for sport." She began packing her supplies. "I'll have a broth sent up. You will drink all of it. I'll be back this evening to check on you." "That won't be necessary," he started, but the look she gave him silenced him immediately. It was the spoon look, even without the spoon. When she returned that evening with a steaming bowl, he took it, his pride warring with his appetite. The broth won. He took a sip and his eyes widened. It was delicious. Rich with chicken, vegetables, and herbs that soothed his throat. His wolf was ecstatic. "She feeds us. She provides for us. This is a courtship offering. We should hunt her a deer." "It's broth, not a mating proposal," Ragnar thought wearily. Lark's wolf, catching the distant rumble of contentment from his wolf through the thin psychic walls between them, made a clinical observation. "His wolf is purring over broth." She paused. "It is admittedly very good broth." They sat in silence as he ate. It was a different kind of silence than before on the northern settlements. Warriors have been rogue attacks on the northern settlements. Warriors have been injured. One was killed. The tracks led to the Blackwood Forest. The honey was a convenient excuse to scout the area without causing a panic. "You went alone." It wasn't a question. "It was my responsibility. I am the strongest. I will not risk my pack warriors unnecessarily." "And Hudson? The man whose literal purpose is to stand beside you in danger?" Ragnar said nothing. "You sent him away on purpose," Lark said. "Protecting everyone except yourself isn't strength, Your Majesty. It's self-punishment." Something flickered in his eyes, a flinch so quick she almost missed it. She had touched something old, something he carried everywhere and showed no one. Lark's wolf went very still. "There is an old wound here, deeper than the bear's claws." "I know," Lark told her wolf. "Tread carefully," her wolf said. And for once, the instruction came not from discipline, but from something gentler. A small, reluctant smile touched his lips. It was the first time she had seen him do anything but scowl. It transformed his face, chasing away the shadows and revealing a startling handsomeness he usually kept buried under layers of regal severity. The sight made something catch in her chest, not quite her breath, more like a knot she hadn't known was there, pulling tighter. His wolf noticed. "She sees us, the real us." Her wolf noticed too. It said nothing, but it pressed closer to the surface of Lark's skin, warm and watchful, and didn't retreat. The fragile truce between healer and patient held for 2 full days. Ragnar, humbled by the blue tongue incident and placated by his own wolf's adoration for his caretaker, was almost cooperative. He stayed in bed. He ate the broth. He allowed Lark to change his dressings without growling. For Lark, the days fell into a strange rhythm. She would arrive each morning, tend to his wounds, and the air would grow thick with an unspoken awareness. The way his breathing changed when her fingers were near his skin. The way she always tucked the same strand of hair behind her left ear when she was concentrating. A gesture he'd begun watching for without realizing it. Then they would talk. He would ask about her herbs, and she would explain with a quiet passion. She would ask about the kingdom, and he would speak of his duties with a gruff responsibility she found herself grudgingly admiring. He found himself telling her things he'd never told anyone. Not Hudson, not the council, not the empty chambers he paced at night. He told her about the weight of a crown placed on his head too young, about the loneliness of a throne no one else could share, about the nightly border reports that kept him awake with worry for people who would never know his name. And she listened, without interrupting, without trying to fix it, and that, the simple, radical act of being heard, loosened something inside his chest that had been locked tight for years. Their wolves had reached their own understanding. His wolf had settled into a quiet, steady adoration, content to simply watch her wolf through Ragnar's eyes. Her wolf had stopped pretending to be indifferent and had begun, grudgingly, responding. A flicker of warmth when his wolf was near, a slight lean towards his presence when he entered the room. Lark's wolf would never admit it out loud, but it had begun to look forward to the mornings. His wolf knew. It was insufferably pleased about it. The palace staff noticed the shift immediately. They saw their fearsome alpha listening intently as a common healer described the best soil for growing lavender. They saw him accept a cup of tea without complaint. The betting pools in the barracks quietly shifted from "how long until he throws her out" to "what month will the wedding be?" Lark began reading to him from dusty tomes of history she found in his study. One afternoon, during a particularly dry passage about a territorial dispute between the northern and eastern provinces, she glanced up to find him not listening at all. He was watching her. Specifically, the way she always tucked the same strand of hair behind her left ear when she turned a page. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. Neither did she. The silence lasted 3 heartbeats, she counted, before she cleared her throat and went back to reading, her cheeks warm. His wolf swooned. She looked at us for 3 whole heartbeats. That is practically a declaration of love. Her wolf observed, "We held eye contact for 3 heartbeats. This is above the professional threshold. We need to recalibrate." Neither of them acknowledged what had just happened, but the air in the room shifted, thickened with a new and tender gravity. On the 3rd day, Ragnar's infamous pride reasserted itself. He was tired of being confined. "I need the trade ledgers from the southern province," he announced that afternoon, already swinging his legs out of bed. Lark placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're not ready for that kind of activity." "I have been idle long enough," he said through gritted teeth, pulling on a fresh tunic with a visible wince. The simple act of dressing himself was a struggle. Undo all our progress. The wound is undo all our progress. The wound is healing well, but the deeper muscle is still weak. "I have rested," he said through gritted teeth. "I am the Alpha King. My strength is not a suggestion, it is a fact. I will not be coddled." He strode out before she could argue further, his gait just a little too stiff, a little too forced. Lark watched him go, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She knew, with absolute certainty, that this would end badly. She busied herself in his chambers, changing the water in a vase of flowers, tidying her medical supplies. She told herself she was just waiting to give him his evening dose of willow bark tea. She was lying. She was waiting for the inevitable. She didn't know how long she'd been asleep that night when the pounding started. Fist against wood, urgent and relentless, she sat bolt upright. "Lark, get up, now!" Hudson's voice, tight with fear. She was at the door in seconds. Hudson stood in the corridor, his face ashen. He collapsed in his study, tried to lift a crate of geological surveys like a complete idiot. I got him back to bed and stitched the worst of it, but the fever spiked 20 minutes ago. "He's burning, Lark. He's delirious." Lark ran the 3-minute walk in 90 seconds, barefoot on cold stone, her satchel thrown over her shoulder. Her mind raced through remedies and dosages, but underneath the clinical calculations, something else was running. A cold, electric fear that had nothing to do with professional duty. Her wolf ran with her. Don't let us be too late. Not again. They burst into the chambers. Ragnar was on the bed, shirtless, the reopened wound dark and ugly against his skin, the edges inflamed and angry. His face was ashen, beaded with sweat, and his eyes, when they opened, didn't see her. They saw ghosts from some other time. "Hudson," she said, her voice steady even as her hands shook. "I need boiling water, clean cloths, and the strongest moonflower essence you can find in the infirmary. The blue bottle, 3rd shelf from the top." They worked side by side through the dark hours. Lark's movements were a blur of efficiency. Hudson followed her clipped instructions without question, his large hands surprisingly deft. Ragnar thrashed and muttered, caught in the fever's nightmares. Names she didn't recognize tumbled from his lips, fragments of battles, commands to soldiers long dead. His wolf had retreated to the deepest part of him, curled tight around his core, burning through its own reserves to keep his heart beating. At one point, his eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Father," he mumbled, "I'm sorry. I wasn't strong enough. I should have been there." Lark pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. "You're here," she whispered. "You're safe." Her wolf pressed against the walls of her chest with something raw and aching. It was feeling his wolf's silence, the absence of the constant, ridiculous, adoring chatter that had become, without her noticing, a comfort. The silence terrified her wolf more than any growl ever could. "Bring him back," her wolf said. It was not a command, it was a plea. Around 3 a.m, the fever peaked. Ragnar's shaking became violent, his teeth chattering so hard she could hear them across the room. Lark brewed a powerful fever-reducing tea, but he was too delirious to drink. She had to coax him, lifting his head, touching the cup to his lips, getting him to swallow one small sip at a time, even surrounded by armies and councils. He's been alone. He paused. His father died when he was 15, killed in a border skirmish that should have been routine. Ragnar begged to go, but his father ordered him to stay, said he was too young. He's never forgiven himself, not for his father dying, for not being there when it happened, for surviving. Lark said nothing, but she understood with sudden, piercing clarity why he fought bears alone, why he sent Hudson to inspect grain stores, why he would rather crawl through thorns than accept a gardener's hand. He wasn't trying to prove he was strong. He was trying to atone for the one time he believed he'd been weak. During one particularly violent fit of shivers, Ragnar reached out blindly. Lark took his hand without thinking. His hand was large and calloused, but burning with fever. She held on tight. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm here. You're not alone." His struggle subsided. His breathing deepened slightly. He seemed to relax, anchored by her touch. And deep inside him, his wolf stirred. Not with words, it was too weak for words, but with a faint pulse of recognition. It curled towards her warmth like a wounded animal towards firelight, and was still. Lark's wolf felt it. The faintest brush of his wolf's presence against hers. Not the exuberant creature that proclaimed her its mate, but something stripped bare. Vulnerable. Honest. Her wolf pressed back, gently, and held. Hudson watched them. His expression shifted from worry to something quiet and wondering. He looked at Lark's hand in Ragnar's, at the way the king's breathing had steadied, and he recognized something sacred happening. Without a word, he rose from his chair. "I'll be in the corridor," he said softly. "Call if you need me." And then it was just the two of them. The hours crawled by. Lark never let go of his hand. She sat in the chair beside his bed, exhaustion settling deep into her bones, her bare feet cold on the stone floor. She monitored his breathing, bathed his forehead, and held on, feeling his pulse against her palm, a fragile, steady beat in the silent room. She was no longer his healer, or his warden. She was his guardian. She was the only thing standing between him and the darkness, and she would not falter. Her wolf kept vigil with her, silent and watchful, lending its strength to her tired body. Two wolves, one fierce and disciplined, one wounded and still, breathing in the same rhythm through the long, dark night. Sometime before dawn, her exhaustion finally claimed her. Her head drooped, coming to rest on the edge of the mattress, and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, her fingers still laced tightly with his. The first thing Ragnar became aware of was the silence. Not the oppressive silence of an empty room, but a peaceful, gentle quiet. The roaring in his ears from the fever was gone. The agonizing fire in his side had subsided to a dull ache. The second thing he noticed was the scent of chamomile and willow bark. The third thing was the warmth enveloping his right hand. He slowly opened his eyes. Dawn was filtering through the tall windows in soft shades of gray and rose. Lark was slumped in the chair beside him, fast asleep. Her head rested on the mattress, her cheek pillowed on her arm. Her brown hair, usually tied back so neatly, had come loose, framing her face in soft waves. She looked younger in sleep, the lines of worry and concentration smoothed away, leaving only a profound, weary peace. Her feet, he noticed, were bare. She had run here without shoes, in the middle of the night, for him. And her hand was still holding his. Her fingers were laced through his, a small, solid anchor in the hazy aftermath of the fever. He could feel the faint, steady beat of her pulse against his skin. He lay perfectly still, not wanting to disturb her. He watched the gentle rise and fall of her shoulders. He noticed the purple smudges of exhaustion under her eyes, the slight redness around her nose from the cold. He noticed the way her lips were slightly parted, the way a single strand of hair lay across her cheek, and he wanted, with a ferocity that frightened him, to brush it away. He remembered the night in fractured, nightmarish pieces, pain, heat, darkness, and a confusing swirl of memories he hadn't visited in years. His father's face, the guilt, the old familiar wound he kept so carefully hidden from the world. But through it all, there had been a constant presence. She saved us. They are our mate. They are. She saved us. They are our mate. They are our home. This time, Ragnar didn't argue. He didn't feel the familiar surge of indignant pride. He just felt a quiet sense of rightness. He saw her not as a challenge to his authority, not as an infuriating commoner, but as the woman who had stayed, the woman who had held his hand through the darkest part of the night, who had run barefoot through cold corridors because she was afraid of being too late. A fierce, protective instinct rose in him, so powerful it stole his breath. It wasn't just his wolf's instinct, it was his own. He wanted to keep her safe, just as she had kept him. And for the first time, that desire to protect didn't feel like a burden or a penance. It felt like something chosen, something warm. She began to stir. Her eyes fluttered open, widening as she realized she was still holding his hand. She snatched it back, a flush creeping up her neck. She sat up straight, instantly resuming her professional demeanor, though her hair was a mess and her tunic was rumpled and she had no shoes. Her wolf, jolted awake, began filing a report. Patient, alive, fever, broken, which we did not let go once. Including which we did not let go once. Including during the period when his temperature had already stabilized, her wolf paused. Our pulse is elevated. This is not a medical reaction. This is a personal reaction. I am logging it for the record. Stop logging things. Your Majesty, she said, her voice rough with sleep. How are you feeling? He pushed himself up onto his elbows, feeling weak but clear-headed. He looked at her, at the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes, the way she was already trying to rebuild the walls between them. "You're a terrible patient," she said, her voice soft, stating it not as an insult this time, but as a simple, weary fact. He held her gaze, letting her see the sincerity in his eyes, the complete absence of arrogance. For the first time, he let her see the man, not the king. "Stay anyway," he said. The words were quiet, but they filled the vast room. It wasn't a command, it wasn't a demand, it was a plea. Her wolf went very, very still. Lark stared at him, searching his face. She saw the exhaustion, the pain, but also something new, something vulnerable and real. He was asking her to stay, not just as his healer, but as something more. Her wolf, the disciplined, ironclad wolf that had never submitted to anything in its life, made its position known with a single word: stay. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "All right, Your Majesty." "Ragnar," he corrected her gently. "My name is Ragnar." A tiny smile touched her lips. "All right, Ragnar. Now, lie back down before you tear your stitches again." He settled back against the pillows, watching her as she moved around the room. She was staying. For now, that was more than enough. His wolf sighed contentedly. She stayed. "Everything is perfect. We should name our pups." "We are not naming pups," Ragnar thought. But he was smiling. It was late evening, days later, when the silence of companionship finally broke open the old wounds they'd both been carrying. The fire had burned down to glowing coals, and the chamber was warm and dim. They had been talking for hours about nothing and everything: herb varieties, childhood memories, the absurd politics of the summer festival planning committee. Then Lark spoke. "I lied to you," she said. Her voice was small. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at her own hands, at the calluses on her palms from years of grinding herbs. "About my brother." Ragnar went very still. "His name was Rowan," she continued, the name coming out rough. "He was 7. I was 16. He had a fever, a bad one, but nothing the village healer couldn't have managed, if she'd come in time. But she was old and slow, and I was just a girl who knew a few herbs from a book. I made the tea wrong. The dosage was off. Too much feverfew, not enough willow bark." She paused. "He died 3 days later. The healer said it wasn't my fault, that the infection was too advanced, that nothing would have saved him. I've never believed her." Her wolf, the wolf that never faltered, curled tight inside her chest and keened. A thin, high sound that only Lark could hear, the sound of 12 years of grief that had never been given voice. "I became a healer because I was too late once," Lark said, finally looking up at him. "Why I held your hand, Ragnar." "Because I know what it's like to let go of someone and not get them back." He didn't say anything wise. He didn't offer comfort or platitudes or the hollow promise that it wasn't her fault. He just reached out and took her hand, gently, the way she had taken his. His wolf reached for hers too, not with its usual exuberance, but with a tenderness so quiet it barely registered. It simply pressed its presence against hers and held, the way one wounded creature lies beside another in the dark. Her wolf let it. For the first time, she let his wolf close without resistance, without analysis, without filing a report. She just let it be there. And the warmth of it cracked something open inside her that she had been holding shut for a very long time. She looked down at their joined hands, his large, scarred, warm, hers small, calloused, trembling slightly, and something inside her, something she had been holding rigidly in place for 12 years, released. She didn't cry, she just breathed, a long, shuddering exhale, and let him hold on. They sat like that for a long time, in the warm afternoon light, saying nothing. Two people who had been carrying their grief alone for years, finally setting part of it down. Such a change could not go unnoticed. One afternoon, their peaceful bubble was burst by the dramatic flinging open of the chamber doors. A woman swept in, radiating expensive perfume and self-importance. She was tall, impossibly beautiful, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes like ice. Think of you with no one to properly care. Think of you with no one to properly care for you. Her gaze swept over Lark and dismissed her. You may go, girl. I will take over his care now. Lark didn't feel intimidated. She just felt tired. Lark's wolf assessed Lady Emma with the speed and accuracy of a predator sizing up a rival. High-status wolf, dominant posture, insecure underneath, compensating. His Majesty's care is proceeding perfectly well, my lady. I'm sure you've done your best for a common healer, Emma said, her tone dripping with condescension. But this requires a noble touch. The help should know its place. Her wolf's hackles rose, not with aggression, but with cold, precise offense. She called us the help. I would like to show her what the help can do. Not now, Lark told her wolf firmly. Before Lark could reply, Ragnar spoke. Help, Ragnar continued, his gray eyes. Help, Ragnar continued, his gray eyes cold and hard. She is the woman who saved my life. She is under my personal protection. And you will show her the respect she is due. Lark was just as stunned. She had grown accustomed to Ragnar's quieter, gentler side, and had almost forgotten the formidable power he held in reserve. To see it wielded on her behalf sent a strange, warm flutter through her chest. Ragnar's wolf was preening. We protect our mate. We are very impressive. Lark's wolf, despite itself, agreed. That was adequate. From her wolf, adequate was practically a standing ovation. Emma recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. Oh, Ragnar, you jest. The fever has left you addled. The only person who will be leaving this room, Ragnar said, his voice dropping even lower, is you, Emma. Now. The dismissal was absolute. Emma shot Lark a look of pure venom, then stormed out, slamming the grand doors behind her. Lark slowly finished tying off the bandage, her hands not quite steady. Thank you, she said quietly. She was insulting you, he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. His thumb stroked her arm. No one insults you in my presence. Emma did not take her dismissal gracefully. She began a subtle campaign against Lark, spreading whispers among the court ladies about the common healer using her feminine wiles to enchant the weakened king. Then it got worse. A vital fever-reducing potion Lark had prepared for a young warrior named Theron, who had taken a poisoned arrow during a border patrol, went missing from the infirmary. It was found spoiled near Lark's locker. By the time Lark discovered the sabotage and brewed a replacement, Theron's condition had worsened dangerously. She saved him, but it was close. Too close, Ragnar found out the next morning from Hudson. The boy nearly died, Ragnar, and the only person in the infirmary during the gap was Emma's lady-in-waiting. Ragnar's voice was the quietest Hudson had ever heard it. Send 2 of my personal guard to shadow Lark, day and night, discreetly, and find me proof, Hudson. Find it and bring it to me. Hudson nodded and left. Ragnar stared at the empty doorway, his wolf a barely leashed fury beneath his skin. This wasn't petty court rivalry. Emma had nearly killed one of his warriors through her vendetta against the woman he loved. The word rose unbidden in his mind, and he didn't push it away. His wolf's reaction was simpler and far more primal. If the golden female has harmed our mate's people, we will end her. Ragnar reined his wolf back. Justice, he told it, not vengeance. His wolf considered this distinction and found it unsatisfying, but complied. That evening, he went to the infirmary himself. He found Lark in the herb garden behind the building, sitting alone on a low stone wall. It was after dark, and the garden was silver and shadow under the moonlight. She didn't look up when she heard his footsteps, which told him she knew who it was. The boy is stable, she said before he could ask. He'll recover. And you? I'm fine. You're not fine. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Wanted to hurt me. Not him. Me. I was wanted to hurt me. Not him. Me. I was supposed to change your bandages and leave. That was the job. And now people are getting hurt because I stayed. People are getting hurt because Emma is cruel, he said quietly. Not because you stayed. And not because you care. You're allowed to care, Lark. About the boy, about this place, about me. You're allowed to do that without punishing yourself for it. She leaned, just slightly, towards him, and her shoulder pressed against his. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He just sat with her in the moonlit garden and let her be something other than strong. Her wolf uncurled from its tight, furious ball and leaned into his wolf's presence, not with the grudging, clinical acceptance of before, but with something naked and honest. I am tired, her wolf said. I am tired of holding everything together. His wolf, for once in its ridiculous, loopy existence, said exactly the right thing. Then let me hold some of it. It was the most intimate moment of his life, and they hadn't even kissed. Hudson's investigation turned up enough evidence to make Emma's position precarious. The council elders were far more impressed with Lark's steadfast competence than with Emma's desperate melodrama. Lord Valerius was overheard telling another councilman that a woman who could face down the Alpha King with a spoon was precisely the kind of steady hand the kingdom needed. A week later, Lady Emma departed the court at dawn, without ceremony. A formal censure was issued in absentia. Lark watched the carriage from a window and felt no triumph, only relief and a small, unexpected thread of pity for a woman who had been so busy playing the game that she'd forgotten there were other ways to live. Ragnar, nearly healed, attended a routine court session for the first time since the bear. The great hall was filled to capacity. Lords and ladies stood beside grim-faced warriors and ancient council members. Ragnar sat on the throne, working through the day's agenda with his old authority. Lark stood near the back with Alara. Her wolf surveyed the great hall with tactical appreciation. 17 exits, 412 occupants. The large man in the third row is hiding a flask in his ceremonial sash. I don't need a threat assessment, Lark thought. It's a court session. Everything is a threat assessment. It was during a perfectly mundane discussion that a small, furry blur shot out from behind the throne. It was the palace's newest resident, a fluffy Samoyed puppy, a diplomatic gift from the Northern Ice Clans. Clamped firmly in the puppy's mouth was a dried, shriveled herb. Lark's blood went cold. She recognized it instantly. Moon petal. A dried cutting she had left in her satchel, the satchel she had set down near the base of the throne, the satchel whose clasp was slightly loose because she kept meaning to fix it and never did. The puppy gave the herb a triumphant chew. Its mouth, tongue, and a significant portion of its fluffy white snout turned a brilliant, vibrant blue. High on the thrill, the puppy began joyful, chaotic zoomies around the great hall, skidding on the polished marble and leaving a trail of tiny, perfect, bright blue paw prints. Her wolf was experiencing its first genuine moment of mortification. That was our moon petal, from our satchel, with the broken clasp we have been meaning to fix for 3 weeks. This is our fault. I need to lie down. The entire court was captivated. Lord Valerius was clutching his side, his face red. Hudson had his face buried in his hands. Ragnar stared at the puppy. He looked at its blue mouth. He looked at Lark, whose face had gone from horrified to mortified. Then he looked back at the puppy. The memory of his own blue tongue crashed over him. His wolf watched with a complex mixture of emotions. A kindred spirit! The puppy too has tasted the forbidden plant. We are brothers in blue! Wait, it came from the healer's satchel? Our mate made this happen? His wolf's chest swelled with pride for reasons that made absolutely no logical sense. She is chaos. Beautiful, perfect chaos. And then Lark started to laugh. Not a polite titter, but a real, genuine, beautiful laugh, her eyes sparkling with mirth. She was laughing at the puppy, at herself, at the cosmic ridiculousness of moon petal striking twice. Ragnar watched her laugh, and something inside him, some final wall, simply dissolved. He had been thinking about doing this properly, a formal announcement, a grand speech. He'd rehearsed lines. He'd planned the perfect moment, the perfect words. Was just another form of the same fear. He'd been carrying his whole life. The fear of being too late. He stood up from the throne. The court fell quiet. The puppy, sensing a shift in the room's energy, paused its zoomies and sat down in the middle of the marble floor, its blue tongue lolling. Ragnar walked down from the dais, his eyes never leaving hers. The crowd parted before him. He stopped directly in front of her and took her hand. "Lark, my wolf recognized you the moment you threatened me with a spoon. My human brain just took a little longer to catch up. My life was all shadows and duty before you. You brought in the light. And a lot of chaos." He glanced at the puppy. "I think I like the chaos." He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing her palm. "Will you be my mate? Will you rule by my side and help me deal with blue-tongued puppies and meddling ladies and the occasional grizzly bear?" The hall was utterly silent, save for the faint panting of the puppy. His wolf was vibrating. "Say yes, say yes, say yes, say yes, say yes." Lark's wolf was trying very hard to maintain decorum. "This is a formal setting. We should consider the implications carefully. We should weigh the political consequences. We should— Oh, who am I kidding? Say yes." Lark looked at his hopeful, open face, at the chaos he was offering her, at the love shining in his eyes. She thought of her quiet, orderly life in the infirmary. It was safe. It was simple. And it was a pale, colorless thing compared to the vibrant, chaotic, utterly wonderful life that stood before her now, disguised as a king with a hopeful heart. "Well," she said, her voice a little shaky but full of warmth, "someone has to make sure you don't go around eating strange plants from the garden." She squeezed his hand. "But only if I get to keep the spoon." Ragnar's face broke into a grin so wide and brilliant it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He let out a whoop of pure, undiluted happiness, a sound so unkingly and so genuine that it made everyone smile. His wolf howled internally with such pure joy that every wolf in the palace felt it like a warm gust of wind. Several guards' wolves howled back instinctively, causing a brief moment of confusion in the hall as a dozen hardened warriors suddenly looked very embarrassed. Lark's wolf sat perfectly upright inside her chest and said, "Acceptable, very acceptable." It was the wolf equivalent of weeping with joy. Lord Valerius began to clap. It was joined by another and another, until the entire court erupted in thunderous applause. Hudson clapped his king on the shoulder. Ilara dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The little blue-mouthed puppy trotted over and sat on Ragnar's foot. He laughed, reached down, and scooped it into his arms. "I believe we have our first royal decree to make," he said, holding up the fluffy culprit. "The official naming of the royal chaos agent." "I think," Lark said, scratching the puppy behind its ears, "we should call him Spoon." And so it was. As the crowd dispersed, the only person not celebrating was Lady Emma. She found Lark alone in the corridor outside the great hall. But she didn't attack. "To you," Emma said, her voice stripped of— "To you," Emma said, her voice stripped of its usual performative silk. "You think love is armor? These people will smile at you in daylight and sharpen their knives at dinner. I know. I've been navigating these halls since I was 14. Lark met her gaze steadily. "You're probably right, but I'd rather face that than walk away from him." Her wolf stood steady inside her, calm and watchful. "We have survived worse. We will survive this, too." Emma held her gaze for a long moment. "Then you're braver than me," she said, so quietly Lark almost didn't hear it. And she walked away. Weeks later, Ragnar, fully healed, ruled with a new lightness. He was still the formidable Alpha King, but now his authority was tempered with warmth and humor that made his people love him as much as they respected him. He and Lark were walking in the royal gardens, the very same gardens where he had made his ill-fated escape. The celestial queen rosebush had been trimmed back, but a small plaque had been placed before it, reading, "Here His Majesty learned the importance of using the stairs." It had been Lark's idea. Beneath it, in smaller script, Hudson had added, "and the importance of reading signs." Ragnar stopped by a marble bench, taking Lark's hands. "My love," he began, his voice a low, romantic murmur. "The moon hangs in the sky like a silver sickle. Run with me under its light." His wolf was ready. "Yes, we run, under the moon. Our fur will shine." He took a dramatic step back and immediately tripped over Spoon, who had been lying in wait. He went down with a surprised yelp, landing in an undignified heap on the grass. Spoon, whose tongue had long since returned to its normal pink, licked his face enthusiastically. Lark's wolf did something unprecedented. It laughed. A full, helpless, wolfish laugh. Lark covered her mouth, but it was no use. A peal of laughter escaped her, bright and clear. Ragnar pushed himself up, grass stains on his breeches, and pulled her into his arms. "You were right," he murmured against her hair. "You bring chaos." "And you wouldn't have it any other way," she whispered. She tilted her head up, and he lowered his to meet her. The kiss was warm and real, and a little bit clumsy because Spoon was trying to join in. It was perfect. Their wolves pressed close inside them, his warm and content, hers steady and sure, two halves of something that finally felt whole. His wolf didn't howl or declare or proclaim, it just breathed, in sync with hers, a quiet harmony that needed no words. Her wolf, the iron-disciplined, no-nonsense, threat-assessing, report-filing wolf that had guarded Lark's heart like a fortress for 12 years, let out a long, slow breath and finally stood down. "We are home," it said. Velvet plaque above the headboard was a large, sturdy, well-worn wooden spoon. It was a daily reminder that sometimes the greatest love stories don't start with a crown, but with a good, firm threat and a healthy dose of absurdity.